Good morning, and welcome to Sunday Soul Day, weekly fuel for your mind, body, and soul. Today we have Charney Kaye, a multi-talented individual with a fascinating journey, whose diverse background spans across art, music, and technology. Charney now has a podcast and focuses his efforts on building mobile apps for big events in the event industry at Endeavor. Alongside his professional endeavors, he also founded XJ Music to explore new possibilities in background music for video games, live streams, and environments. Welcome to Sunday Soul Day, Charney.
Thanks, Demisha. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Good morning, Allie.
Good morning, Demisha. Good morning, Charney. We are so excited to have you on today.
Good morning, Ellie. Hey.
Yeah, so Charney and I actually met each other back in our Goodwater Capital days. Shout out to Goodwater and the team over there doing extraordinary things. I actually recruited Charney to Goodwater, and I must say, like his background is it's very non-traditional. And I was really excited. I love finding resumes like this because a lot of times I find gems. And so when I find these opportunities, I think like as a recruiter, it's so important to go beyond the resume and dig deeper into the person and into their characteristics, their traits, their core values, and kind of learn a little bit more about them. And so that's exactly what I did with Charney, who has a very non-traditional background, which we'll get into. But I am just so grateful first that you said yes to Goodwater and we got to work together, and then also just happy to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. Yeah, great to see you again.
Absolutely. Well, I would love to have the audience learn a little bit about your journey, because you started, or kind of had a, like I said, non-traditional start, but share with us your journey from film post-production to advertising art, then to software development. How did your diverse background influence your approach to technology?
Yeah, as you mentioned, when you're looking at just engineers, my background is maybe not what you'd expect, but software engineers come from all over the place, right? And in my case, I just grew up tinkering a lot with machines, with computers. I actually have been programming since I was a young kid. And I mentioned that I'm a hacker, which for me is like really old tradition. That, I think that word these days sometimes gets interpreted to mean, people that are like breaking into systems, and that's one take on it. But for me, it came from a place of curiosity, and the hacker ethos is really this dedication that life and work should be interesting, that boredom and drudgery are bad, and that, no problem should ever be solved twice. It's a lot of these kinds of things. So I started off really just from this place of curiosity, and I built a lot of video games early on, just like play, right? Like I was a kid. And I never looked at this as something that I would do for a career, which is interesting also because perhaps the climate and the time that I grew up in, it just wasn't as prevalent. And I went to film school. I went to NYU Film, and uh, when I got there, it was interesting because while I also am an artist and I've been a musician also my whole life, there's kind of like the three tracks that I've been in, and those are the things that I'm passionate about. And being passionate about art is a very significant part of my background, right? Um, so when I went to film school, I got into post production, which even though I do love physically building things and I love making films, it was this kind of ongoing theme right from the beginning, doing the technical side of things. Because when you got a group of people together, like somebody's got to dive in and just do some of the maybe less fun or pleasant work, right?
Yeah.
So right from the get-go, I was doing post-production and animation, editing, video editing. And as I got out into the workforce, I was doing a lot of freelance video editing. And this turned into sort of in series, it turned into art direction because living in New York City, advertising is the biggest game in town for film and for everybody. And as I got into that, this background for art just came to the surface. Again, I was guided by what I was good at, and the people that were managing me as they got to know me would just put me on these tasks that were the most creative or involved solving interesting problems. And that this sort of blend of video and film post-production and animation and art direction turned into working on web projects. And that was in the mid 2000s, right, in advertising in New York City. And once I was around that again for the first time since I had been a kid, just programming, as a hobby, I reached this conclusion pretty rapidly, which is that if I'm going to be around code at all, if I'm going to be around software development, I want to be around good software development. And I was freelancing at these agencies, and I would repeatedly find myself being the only computer programmer around on the team, just doing the implementation. And it felt like if you were a carpenter and you kept on being asked to build just like fake movie sets, just pretend houses that were stood up by 2x4s. So I made this internal commitment that I wanted to learn what good software development was, and I wanted to be around other people that were doing this. And so not having a computer science background, right, or not having an undergrad computer science degree, I started participating in a lot of hackathons, which was a really cool way to get started. And I would recommend that to anybody that was trying to break into that field, because there were for a few years there, like maybe not every weekend, but just as many as I could participate in, some just for 2 days, some are a week long. And you show up, there's all these different people with all these different skills. People get on the mic and talk about different projects they want to do, and you kind of volunteer and self-organize. And it was an incredible opportunity over the course of a few years to get to meet a lot of people that were professional software developers and just kind of get my hands dirty in this like low risk or no risk really environment. And yeah, slowly over time, during my last 5 years of living in New York City, I got into some more serious software development jobs. And then the last job that I had before moving out west, where we met, and basically right leading up to Goodwater, I worked at a company called Signal that was later acquired by TransUnion. And that was a real tech job for 3 years. So, I guess kind of circling that around, the bottom line is that creativity is something that I think comes up for a lot of different people. This is a part of a lot of different people's lives, a lot of different professions, whether you're a lawyer, like diplomats, product managers, and recruiters. You're solving problems and just being able to think about things in a dynamic way, being able to sort of like see past the obvious, and especially to gather information and listen and empathize with a lot of different sources and come up with interesting solutions that are like very specific to exactly what the current situation is. That type of creativity has served me the best over the years, and I think it's still the signature mark of like who I am as an engineer. So yeah, as you said.
Love, love, love. I love that, because you're so well-rounded, and I think like a lot of times when we think of a traditional, I'll put that in quotes, engineer, we forget that they're a whole person too, like they're not just one-dimensional, and they do have a creative side. And I actually love that about you. When I saw that in your background and just your breadth of experience, I was like, he's just so interesting. I want to talk to him, and I'm like, I'll never forget it, because we were looking for a senior, engineer, and the CS background, all that stuff. And so you didn't quite fit that, but I was like, he's really interesting. I'm so grateful I did, because what you brought to Goodwater, and I'm not the only one who will say this, but you made such an impact. So I love that you touched on the creativity aspect, because I think a lot of times, even in my role as a recruiter, I tried to find ways to get creative, and to kind of touch on my creativity, in my role that wasn't naturally creative. It's like, it's very numbers driven, finding the right candidate for the organization, but how I use my creativity was just in that, looking at the whole person and, finding ways to connect with people, outside of just the role, because you're not just looking for a cultural fit. And this is something that has served me in my 11 plus years of experience in tech. But I never just looked for a cultural fit. I looked for a cultural addition. And so, yeah, and you were definitely that.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that, the danger in engineering, and maybe there are some roles in which you need somebody that's just totally isolated, but I think that what we learn over and over again with software development is that it's so hard to figure out what you should actually be doing and how to focus your efforts, and not just kind of like putting one foot in front of the other.
So you were sharing a little bit about how you've navigated through various industries, tech, finance, entertainment. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the companies that you've worked with and some of the unique challenges and opportunities that you've encountered along the way?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you separate kind of what our actual role is from the culture and the DNA of a particular company, right? That so many companies, especially these days, are going to have these different components. Like a finance company like Goodwater has got a lot of technology, and that's their core, and it's in their DNA, being tech investors, but also using technology. And what we think of as traditional tech companies, to me, can be a bit dry. They're almost like being in kind of like a rank and file, almost like a military organization that's just completely focused on technology. So, as I said, my background being in art and going to film school and having my first professional network be filmmakers, that was my first view into the world. And it's still something that I just love. Being around production is really exciting. Being on film sets is the coolest thing, and just participating in that is so cool. So that was my foray, and my earliest career was like interning or being a production assistant on film sets, and it was super exciting. And I had almost just this glimpse, and the way that I got even from there into advertising was that there are these people on set that came from the ad agencies. I got to work on some just interesting films early on, but then it was largely advertising. And I started meeting people that were kind of showing up on the set, but they came from these companies. They came from advertising agencies that were just hiring out the production companies. And so when I showed up in those companies, that was really interesting because it was like getting on the other side of this wall where, they're being in conference rooms and just like it's totally different situation. So the way that they looked at the stuff that I had been involved in before that was like it was this other culture. And so being somebody that moved from production culture into the agency side required like a sensitivity and just this understanding that these are two different cultures, and I'm going to speak to people in these different areas, just a little bit of kind of code switching that you'd have to be aware of. But doing it genuinely, I think, is really important. Like I didn't go into the agencies trying to pretend that I wasn't a boots on the ground production person. I specifically remember the suits. There's these little details that stand out. So I suddenly was in a situation. This is New York City. I had, was freelancing in some fairly large agencies, and there was just like a class of person at these agencies that was wearing really expensive tailored suits, and so I had to find my niche and be, sort of accurately represent where my background was coming from. So as an art director for all those years, I was like into sneakers, and it was just always, streetwear and like, but I'm sitting in meetings with a few other people that are wearing really expensive suits. And there was just always these kind of two cultures side by side. And so it was interesting, like getting more into finance, that that was a very interesting culture, right? Goodwater brings together just like this whole other group of people. But I will say that being at Endeavor these days, being back in entertainment, does feel like kind of coming full circle. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you raise a really good point of the idea of kind of meeting yourself where you're at. as you're allowing yourself to transition into a new environment, we have to all give ourselves grace and time to adjust to those new situations. And that crossover, you bring such a new flavor that maybe the new environment didn't have before.
Mm.
Yeah. And then, so I have kind of a part two of my question from before. Can you tell us about your role at Endeavor and your experience building mobile apps for big events? Like, what were some challenges and highlights that you've encountered in this role?
Sure. And it's interesting, like Demisha has experience on the recruiting side. And when I was looking for a job this last time around, I was pretty open as to what industry I would be in. And there was just this synergy that hit when I was talking with the folks at Endeavor. That yeah, it's pretty intense. It can get really Hollywood. I fortunately am not exposed to that at all. It just, I'm in a sort of a very niche pocket of the overall organization. Um, but so yeah, I say one of the big challenges is just culturally that I have to be able to fulfill this specific need that I was brought on board for. We were literally building mobile apps. But then the other side of that, where all of my past experience is really helpful, is just understanding what is really important within that, and what surfaces of the work that I'm doing are going to impact and drive value for the overall business. There's a couple different events that we've worked on, and they've all had their own unique challenges. So the mobile apps team, I actually bring it back. So I work for a subsidiary in the Endeavor portfolio called On Location, which is an event logistics company. They handle, for example, all the logistics for the Super Bowl and like a lot of other NFL events. And they have a portfolio of hundreds of events that they actually do logistics for. But we only do mobile apps for a very small number of them. And within the organization, the mobile app team is looked at as kind of a high value item that in order to get one of these mobile apps, and we had to build a track record of doing like really great work in that category. We started with Hyde Park Winter Wonderland. That is an event in London that happens every year. The next one was the Barrett Jackson Auto Auction, which is the biggest auto auction here in North America. And they, in every case, the event organizers themselves talk to the parent company and they make the case that they should have an app. The parent company has to make this decision that they're going to put our team, on that. And every case has been different, but it has been, I guess, just to pick one item that for me is really exciting. Like one of the most impactful things, or the moment that I felt like I was just really doing a great job. We got all this feedback back from the Barrett Jackson Auto team after we had launched this app. And there's people that had been doing this job for 20 years, working at the event. And they said, look, the whole time I've been doing this job, whenever we needed to find a car at this auction, it was mayhem, didn't know where to find it. This is the first year that we're able to just look up any vehicle in this app, navigate to it with GPS walking directions at the event. You absolutely changed our lives. This is great. And so it was even just the staff. These are technically coworkers. They're like co-working cousins of ours, right, within the parent company. But that moment of impact and kind of like that internal recommendation of what we had done went really far.
Oh my goodness, that was incredible. And I love when that happens, like whether it's customer feedback or internal feedback or, like you said, your cousins, sisters, like
Yeah.
I love that, so, and it sounds like you're making a great impact there as well. You are a music lover. And that's something that you and I share in common and bonded on while we were at Goodwater. You were born in Chi-Town. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with music growing up. What do you think it is about you and your nature, your learning style, your experience that kind of drew you to music in the first place?
Yeah, right. I'm from Chicago, and I've been playing piano since I was a kid. That was something else that kind of goes back almost basically as far as computer programming. Unfortunately, didn't stick with it over the years. So some of my friends that I made when I was, in high school or around like 18, 19 years old, like went on and are still practicing 4 hours a day. And I get so jealous when I see them just jamming together. But, they certainly look up to me for just like having put in the time on a career. But I think the thing that originally drew me to music, besides just that it's just a part of me, is how immediate the impact for other people is. Like even people that are not musicians themselves, as far as a language and a way of communicating with people and putting in energy into something that other people can enjoy. There's just nothing like music, I think. So yeah, early on, it was in high school actually, maybe even before then. I was producing electronic music, but in high school I started DJing, and I was part of the whole DJ crew in my hometown in high school that we like put on the major events and stuff. So yeah, DJing back when physically bringing the crate of vinyl to the party
Oh,
was
come on.
part of
Oh, I love it.
the work of a DJ. Yeah, yeah. And, going down to Untitled Records in downtown Chicago and, digging through the crates and kind of always having these two lives. Like on the one hand, we had to have all the top 40 music. And so I've always appreciated pop music. And that was, when we went to DJ the major high school parties, like you better have all of the top 40 stuff. But at the same time, developing these niches for electronic music. And I was actually in a reggae crew, a dance hall crew. So that was very interesting and informed a lot of my background. While I was learning about house music and drum and bass music, I was also learning about dance hall, and it kind of all ties together. There's all of this overlap about the accessibility and dancing to music and why people enjoy music. So it's cool. Some of my friends in Chicago are actually still very successful DJs. It's interesting.
I know you were posting some of them up on your social
Oh
media
yeah,
over the
yeah,
years I've been following you. So I've been
cool.
following along as well. But I could not agree more. Music is it's such a unifier, and it's just done more for, and I'll stand on this. I'm not something that Jay-Z said. It's done more for race relations than anything else, on
Mhm.
top of just has the ability to evoke such emotion in us, like whether it's
Mhm.
like we're just, sad, listening to sad music, like happy, like ready to party, ready to turn all the way up, like
Yeah.
I love that about music, and I love that you have that connection as well. I'm very similar. It's like the one thing besides my kids, I said I can't live without. So I love it.
Absolutely.
In
Yeah.
Chi-Town, oh my gosh, sorry, Allie. I'm like I
Yeah,
family in
was
Chi-Town,
oh yeah.
like so that we have that in common as well.
When you talk about bringing people together, I can say I have a lot of experiences DJing high school parties where it was incredible. Like you're kind of trying out different styles of music and getting different groups of people onto the dance floor, and then ultimately kind of coaxing this blend out that just has everybody on the dance floor.
Yeah, I absolutely love hearing about your music background and your passion around music. I too love music. I'm a dancer. I grew up dancing. I coached cheerleading, and every gathering, family party, I'm the one that's out there dancing to the music, even if I'm the only one out there. And
Yeah.
it completely just makes the night. And I
Yeah.
love how it brings everyone together onto the floor. It loosens people up. So I couldn't agree more about the connection that music has on all of us. I wanted to ask you about your company, XJ Music. So it focuses on enabling composers to explore new possibilities in background music. So can you elaborate on the innovative approach that you've taken and the impact it's had on the industry?
Sure. I will say that, we're still very much in a startup phase, but we've found a group of people that are really interested in what we're doing, and that's in video games. And I think that you could still apply this to live streams for sure and environments, which in a way for me, DJing is a kind of background music. Although it is really a little bit more primary music. What we built with XJ Music is a digital audio workstation, like any other tool that somebody would use when they're producing electronic music on a computer. It's going to work alongside your existing tools, but it's focusing on the actual delivery. And when people are composing music for video games, especially, they think in like dynamic music systems, and how are you going to make a composition that actually changes depending on what the player is doing. And the tools that are available in the video game industry now, which Fmod and Wise to name them, are very powerful, but they really focus on sound effects. They focus on kind of delivering the overall experience, and music composers are left kind of to their own devices to hack together what they need for delivering the music. So we built something out it's music specific. It is very handcrafted though, and I think we're in this time now where you see a lot of generative AI. Visit from Sugar here.
Hello, Kitty. What's Kitty's name?
Sugar.
This is
Who's
Sugar.
this?
Sugar.
Hi, Sugar. Welcome to the show. Sugar's liking being on camera, huh?
Yeah, we're gonna hang out right here. Okay. Yeah, so we're in this time now where there's all of this generative AI, a lot of generative music solutions that are creating music, from scratch essentially. And what we've been doing is not for that at all, really. And it's interesting to be in this time now where generative AI is so ubiquitous that that's a lot of the time what people assume that we're doing. And even like our closest customers, like the artists that we would like to use this, are scared off now in the last couple of years because they associate it with this other generative AI stuff. But what we build is really more for people who do want a lot of control and have a really specific vision for what they're doing. And they just want to be able to deliver it in a way that's dynamic and that you can influence it. Like in a live streaming situation, you might just press, a few key buttons to have the music change with what's happening, and hit cues, and do it in a way that's like very musical. So it's not just fading from one song to another.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. And it's way over my head, but my husband's a software engineer. So when he watches this episode, he'll be able to interpret for me everything, and he'll totally geek out on everything that you're saying.
Cool. Yeah, it is tricky to bring it down to earth sometimes, actually. But I think part of it is that the audience that we've been going for, video game music composers, do have their hands dirty with these, exact subjects.
Okay, so if you can sum it up in one sentence for our audience who is just like Allie, what would you say that XJ Music is?
I'd say XJ Music is a tool for composers to deliver music in a dynamic way so that, it's not just one recording, but it can change every time you hear it.
See, there you go.
Thank you, Demisha, for asking that question.
It's good practice for me too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Are you looking for investors or anything? Are you guys going down that route?
We've certainly been having conversations with investors. The main thing that comes up is about adoption, and just proving that there's a market out there to capitalize. So we've been bootstrapped so far, and I think that's a good path. But we're right in this zone now of needing to find adoption, which is, just having a lot of conversations with video game music composers. And like, I'm attending the game developer conference here in San Francisco that's coming up in less than 2 weeks. And, just the way I see it, the way I see it, what we need in order to be successful and what it all hinges on is finding at least one person, and hopefully they're representative of a group of people that see this tool that we built and they say, wow, I need to use that. I want to use that in order to realize my vision. And that ties into something that I really think is just good wisdom for anybody building anything, to try and build something that's for a specific person, and to be able to have even one person just say, no, I love this, like, this is awesome, is kind of, just like a tipping point where you're not pushing a boulder uphill anymore, but you can respond to real needs.
No, it's so interesting you said that. That's one of the pieces of advice that we got from an entrepreneur and marketer who we had on Sunday Soul Day a while back, Pedro M. Frias. He actually said the exact same thing, like narrow down your customer to one person, build for that person, have all of your things point to that one person on social media content, everything, and then go find more like them, so I love that you also mentioned that as well. And I think video games is like right exactly where you need to be, like for this particular tool that you summed up in one sentence for us. I used to work in video games as well for Naughty Dog. Shout out to Naughty Dog under the Sony umbrella. They are an incredible studio that I worked for early on in my career. Like you mentioned, like working in film and games, all that, those industries, those really creative industries are just, not to take anything away from tech, which is also creative and amazing and touches millions, sometimes billions of lives depending on the app that you build. But I will never forget my experience there, working in that creative space. So really, really grateful I had that at the beginning of my career. So you also have a podcast. Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
It started off, part of my background in music and audio was broadcasting, and this has sort of always been a thread, like something that I enjoyed doing. But we started doing this podcast when we're building XJ Music, and I was realizing that we had done a lot of building and we had not actually done a very good job of exactly what we're just talking about, figuring out, well, who are we building this for? And we started having conversations with people to ask them exactly that, to just put this product in front of them and find out what their background is and what they're using it for, and doing it on the air, as it were. Partly, these are conversations that we want to have anyway, but I just actually think they're kind of interesting, and editing them down and sharing them with people is a way of being really transparent, partly about what we're doing, and especially for people that are curious for this like deeper context about the whole thing. But also just as a creative person, like just as a matter of interest. So yeah, it was something that we pushed ourselves to do, and hope that people enjoy along the way.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Charney. And I love how you're approaching your podcast and really using it as an opportunity to learn about your customer and your target customer of who you're going after. So I love that you do that.
Charney, you've mentioned you are a student of human-machine interaction. Can you tell us more about what this is and how it could be important for people's mind, body, and soul?
Absolutely. On the one hand, human-machine interaction is a subject of anthropology and design and ergonomics, and it's part of human-centered design. So there's all these different fields that interact with this. I can tell you the first machine that I ever built was a vending machine. I was a little kid, and I took a cardboard box and I painted the front of it like a vending machine and sort of cut some holes in it. And then I was just inside of it. And that was it. Like I invited my parents to come buy stuff from the vending machine, and I just, took the money and then put the stuff out of the machine. So it was like a really early form of prototyping, but I do think it speaks to something, a term I learned actually from a colleague that, Demetria, I had dinner with recently, Brian Troutwine, who we met at Goodwater.
Yes,
and
amazing.
Yeah, it's a really amazing guy, his background in mathematics, and he's an incredible presenter. And I just learned so much from him on these walks that we went on in Burlingame on our lunch breaks. And so he shared with me this term, mechanical empathy, which I think is really interesting, as something that I think that I would look for in anyone that is building machines. And the origin actually came from race car drivers that were, they're driving this machine, and it turned out that the best race car drivers have this kind of mechanical empathy, that they can just feel what the machine is going through, and they know how hard to push it before it'll break. But the reverse is true. When we're talking about building machines and we're considering the interaction between a human and machine, we're usually describing as building a machine that, building a machine with empathy to what the human being is going to go through. And I think that that's really huge, so I think it's really important to consider this in consumer technology, right? Because it's something that people are going to be using all the time. But it's also really important to consider it in any kind of technology that we're building, because it's going to impact people, and um, there's so many different ways that you can approach it, like looking at the psychology of how people sort of project onto machines, like how we anthropomorphize machines. So, for example, with all these GPTs that are coming out, Chat GPT, and a lot of this generative stuff, there's a real problem with people assuming that these things actually are understanding you and the way that they're speaking to them, um, as if it's this thing that understands you. And the truth is that in a lot of ways, it has everything in common with a psychology experiment from 40 years ago or more called Eliza, the first chatbot, which would just kind of reflect back to you almost exactly what you were saying, but just with the flavor of being answers from a therapist. Um, so I think it's interesting to just have a kind of responsibility, and to just take this seriously. If we're anywhere around building machines, just understanding that we're going to have an impact on the society. Um, and so I do think, wrapping it up, that my background in art uh, and just looking at all these philosophical aspects of life does really help me in that way when I'm building machines. It comes down to craft and just taking that really seriously, and always considering the impact of what we're doing.
Yeah. Wow, that is so good. I love how you explained like the mechanical empathy and then the relationship with humans. It's such a good reminder because I know I'm working with AI right now on a book, a storybook, and I am communicating as if it's supposed to understand me. And I'm getting really angry that it's making like a park bench that's butter melting onto it. And I'm like, I just told you exactly what to do.
Right.
So
You can see it happening, and it's totally natural what you're going through in that moment, where you're getting angry with it, because it's like, look, I specifically told you what to do. Why don't you understand me? That's a very natural human experience, right?
yeah.
So
Or like I get in fights
yeah.
with Alexa all the time, as if she's supposed to get it.
Yeah. And how funny now that Alexa is, like a whole past generation of this, compared to some of the stuff we're dealing with.
I was
But I
just
do
gonna
think
say
it's
that.
really, yeah.
Amazing.
It is really important to remember these things, though, as we're increasingly in this world that's making promises like that, with generative art. I think that something that I try to remember when I'm dealing with these generative systems, whether it's text only with Chat GPT or image generation with a lot of these new things, now we've got video generation, um, is that all the machine is doing is reflecting back what you said to it, and it's going to do it in the flavor of whatever content it's actually got stored in its memory. And I think, it's interesting, you hear the argument these days that people that are building AI will say, well, the human mind is just a machine that learns from all of the art that it's read, and then it generates art. And I think that they're ignoring something really important in that, which is that we are also a life, so yes, you, during the course of your life, you study all this art and you have these memories of it, but then you live your life, and all of these things are a part of your life, and you have this mortal experience, this human experience. And then when you go to create something, it's not just the imitation of all the inputs, it's this understanding, and and you're doing it with your actual existence. So at the very least, what I really hope that we start demanding from companies that are putting these tools out is transparency about where the material is coming from, um, so that if you're getting a butter melting on a park bench, like, that is the result of the way that those people tagged the content that they happen to put into it, and it would be really helpful if that AI image generation was being transparent with you and just saying, okay, based on what you said, I've pulled these bits from my data bank, and I'm going to combine them. It's interesting.
That's such good, feedback. And again, going back to the empathy, not just mechanical empathy, but also on the user,
Mm-hmm.
And you're so right. I think a lot of times we have all of these inputs and inspirations, from different things, but then we also have the life, as you called, or the emotions, and
Yeah.
where we're different. And so
Mm-hmm.
I love that you touched on this. This conversation is so good. It's so rich and delicious. It's like I want to keep talking about this because I'm so fascinated by AI, as so many of us are, and as Ali mentioned, we're working on a children's book, which we've already shared. So but it's so cool to see like what she's telling it to do, and then what it
Yeah.
so it's been a fun ride for us for sure. Well, you do a lot for the community that you're serving. And I am so fascinated because when we first met at Goodwater, you had a whole process to, you were fasting throughout the day and not, not eating at all at lunch, like partaking in our meals that we serve, our delicious meals we served at Goodwater. And I was so fascinated by that and how focused you were. You had such a incredible focus, like when you worked, where you were able to just stay like really locked in. So I'm so curious, like, first, are you still doing that? And then also, like, what are some of your like regular routines and how to take care of yourself, like your mind, body, and soul?
Sure. I will say that my doctor convinced me not to push it quite so hard on the fasting. I think of it as it's true. I was really just going all out for a moment there, and I'll come back to this, but I do think that I have the ability to harness discipline and like make a decision about doing something and then sticking with it. Um, I still do usually start eating somewhere around noon and try to cut it off around 8 p.m. And I've heard also that it can be different for men and women, different for different people. So it's something that, anybody should like check in with their regular physician and make sure that like it's actually adding up to the right body chemistry. I think that there's a quote that I really love, which sort of attributed to a few different sources, and it's that you cannot think your way into right action, but you can act your way into right thinking. And I learned that not even that long ago, but it sums up, I think, a lot of things that have really helped me over the years, which is that the experience of being human, like it's just very moment to moment. There are things that can influence us, or just like thoughts, or some actual problem that comes up that we're presented with, and the emotions that surround that can like totally change what reality looks like on the drop of a dime sometimes. And I think that it's kind of just very deliberate discipline have served me really well over the years. And it's not something that I was born with at all. Even down to like sleeping, for example, when I was a teenager and I'm talking about getting into all these creative things and music, like I think when I first had this conversation with my doctor when I was about 19 years old, I was sleeping like 4 days a week, and just totally random intervals. And this does also kind of speak to the way that I've always been like very intense, right? And as a creative person, as an artist, like you just pull in these really long, like late night shifts, working on some animation project and just going for many, many hours, like all the way through the night and into the next day. And I think that's something that a lot of artists can relate to. But my doctor just said, like, you can't keep this up, and you're definitely only even getting away with this because you're a teenager. And so I started keeping track of my sleep and just making it a priority, which still, I was well into my 20s before I really got this under control. But it's because at any given night when I'm engaged in some project, and this is true to this day, it's like 8 p.m., 9 p.m. I'm like, okay, we're working a little late today. But if it's something that has really got my attention, I could just keep going. And there's this kind of a peace and quiet of late nights that, again, that's just very personal for me, that I love it so much. So there's this other very deliberate thing that comes in, which is just saying like, okay, I know that in the bigger picture, I have to have regular sleep. Like I just have to. And that if it's not easy for me to see this now, but I've already learned these lessons. I've made these decisions. And so yeah, sleeping being the number one thing, and then all these other things, eating, exercise, specifically just getting enough exercise. Like obviously we could talk about different kinds of exercise, that works for different people, but like the essence of it, just
Yeah.
and using apps to keep track of it, right? So just yeah, making sure that I've like actually burned off all this extra energy. And there's something about exercise too that I think is just at the core of being a living animal, that like all this rational thought, all of these ideas about what I should be doing are kind of useless if I'm just totally restless. Um, and so much of like the career that I've chosen involves a lot of like sitting still, just focusing on things and doing stuff on the computer. And so even like what you saw when I first showed up at Goodwater, and that was an interesting change because I think when I first started there, we had talked about like maybe working remote 1 day a week, but really like for actually I think basically the whole stretch that I was there until quarantine. I mean, I think I maybe would work remote 1 day, but it was just part of the culture that you show up in the office. And so I met that challenge with, in kind of in my own style, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to show up and then we're just going to focus. I'm going to get this done. Um, and there's a lot of things that go into that, because I realized that that doesn't come naturally for everyone. It didn't come naturally for me either. Um, I think that it's a combination of just like getting the energy, the restless energy out in other ways, which includes exercise. Also, meditation has just helped me so much over the years. Like, I'm not talking about, I still like, I don't do really long retreats or Vipassana or anything, but I will say that something like 5 to 15 minutes a day of just sitting um, and really just clearing my mind, really going through this exercise of trying not to think about anything is pretty incredible, because it's like my mind is so active that even it's like when I'm in the middle of something else, or I'll be at the gym working out and my mind's like, okay, well, as long as I'm just here, why don't I just think about this other thing that I need to get done? I'll just do some kind of like some planning work in my head or whatever. And I'll remind myself like, no, this is your time to just be and not do. I mean, and that's still while working out, but it's like the ultimate is to just grant ourselves time to just really be.
I love that. And it's so this is why I love this question, because we get such a mixture of answers,
mm,
and I think really just movement in general, like you talk about like working out and just, getting the stuff out of you. It just requires you to move, like I love walks, like I love
mm,
going out in nature. I will literally just walk out of my house and, have no direction of where I'm going, but I'll just stroll. And it's like, it allows me to clear my mind, so then I can come back and be creative, or I'll move literally my location in my house, so I think just
yeah.
having that movement is so important. And then also too, like the meditation and just being still, like I think a lot of times we
Mm,
don't grant ourselves that opportunity to just be with ourselves and our thoughts and our, or no thoughts at all, like trying to calm your mind,
mhm,
and so I
mhm,
love that you touched on that. Well, we normally ask this question to everyone as well, which is, do you have any recommendations for books or podcasts? But since you are so into music like I am, I thought we'd switch it up a little bit and ask for any music recommendations that have maybe an artist that's been a part of your life that's been instrumental or inspiration for you.
this is always, I'm so bad at answering this question because I just like go off on all these tangents. Also, a lot of my taste is kind of just esoteric, like electronic music. I think when you asked me to share a favorite song earlier, and I was like, oh my God, there's so many different places that could go. I listen to a lot of drum and bass while I'm working, which is a very niche genre that very few people enjoy. But let me see. That's such a tough one.
Okay, who's in your playlist right now?
What's in my playlist right now, I've been again just like listening to drum and bass mixes or artists that are hard to name, like Anile and Icicle. But I've listened to Charles Mingus, actually. It's like a favorite jazz artist, and Zap is actually a band that makes the playlist pretty frequently. And Corey Wong is and Wolfpack actually are I like music that's got a backbeat, and yeah, it's interesting actually, like not being able to name this band. Clutch, it's a rock band. It's like a favorite of mine. They've been around for a long time, and
I'm gonna have to check them out. I haven't haven't heard any of their music.
yeah, it's funny for being like so into music, naming things. I'll tell you, I've been listening to this podcast called Strong Songs, which is really cool in terms of learning about music. And they sort of like are always going through different artists and just disassembling songs. Like I heard him break down Michael Jackson's Thriller the other day. It's just like a really cool journey. And there's another podcast called Song Exploder, which is actually on NPR, that I also love. It's like really eclectic. I'll listen to basically anything musically, but I really love these insights into like how things were made and learning more about them.
It's the hacker in you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing about your music. And I loved listening to you about your self-care, and our audience, I'm sure will really appreciate hearing that part of your self-care is recognizing that your need to get out excess energy and kind of that monkey mind chatter. I think that's really great. So I wanted to just kind of touch on that and then ask you, what are some of your future goals and aspirations, either personally or professionally?
Well, I will say that we're putting sort of a timeline on XJ Music. Like, it's been an incredible journey, and I'm really confident that what we built is in its final incarnation. So I'm really devoting this year to trying to find adoption for that. And in the future, I think I want to get into building indie video games that I just have increasingly looked over. The more that I've been around video game industry, I just see a lot of myself in that. It can be a really grueling industry, so there's a sense of wanting to, keep my day job, as it were, but it's really calling me.
That's great. Charney, this has been such an amazing interview with you. I've learned so much, and I just so appreciated chatting with you, having you on. Your voice is so soothing and comforting. I was, thinking I want you to come over and read some bedtime stories. Anyway, it was so great having you on, and I am so excited for whatever's next for you.
Thanks. Yeah, great to see you, Ali and Denisha. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. You're just so knowledgeable, and I love chatting with you. I always feel like I learned something, or, get an opportunity to have a different perspective, something that I like to call my mental orgasms. And so, today has been just that. You fueled our souls, but also you provided the mental orgasms. And apparently, now you're a bedtime story reader too. So go ahead. But thank you so much.
Anytime. Thank you.
Yeah, and everyone in the audience, have a beautiful Sunday, and go ahead and leave us a comment below. Be sure to share this incredible interview out with Charney Kaye, and be sure to follow him as well. Have a blessed Sunday.